A dramatic week, of course, in the Michael Jackson doctor trial.
For the first time ever, recordings of detectives questioning Dr. Conrad Murray made public and played in court. The recordings so compelling you could hear a pin drop in court. We'll discuss the effect they could have on the jury. And the other dramatic moment.
The defense goes on the offense, challenging a coroner's investigator. But first, let's start with those recordings of Conrad Murray. Inside a room at the Ritz-Carlton in Marina del Rey, Dr. Conrad Murray, with his attorney, spoke to police for 2 hours on audio tape. One of his first revelations, that Michael Jackson told him he'd been taking propofol for years.
He never told me that he administered it himself, but he had said to me that the doctors allowed him to infuse it himself.
That, of course, supports the defense contention that Jackson, quote, self-administered the drugs. Moving on, Murray said after sedatives didn't work with Jackson on his last night, the singer pleaded for the milk, as he called it, so he could get some sleep before rehearsing.
He said, I can't function if I don't sleep. They will have to cancel it, and I don't want them to cancel it, but they will have to cancel it. So I agreed. I'd been watching for long enough period that I felt comfortable. Then I needed to go to the bathroom.
Murray said he was gone 2 minutes. No mention of the 40-something minutes of cell phone calls. Then
I came back to his bedside and I was stunned in the sense that he wasn't breathing.
Murray said he started mouth-to-mouth and CPR immediately.
I then continued CPR with my left hand, singularly, reached for my cell phone, and then called his assistant, which number I had, Brother Michael.
It would be 9 minutes before 911 was called. Jackson was already gone.
I cared about him. I didn't want him to fail. I had no intentions of hurting him. And I was compassionate. But what I was doing to recognizing that Michael Jackson may have had a dependency to substance, I was trying to wean him off.
Well, joining us now is Anthony Falangetti, a defense attorney and former prosecutor.
So you heard all that. This is the prosecution's case. It seemed like it maybe played for the defense.
Well, certainly certain types of evidence cuts both ways. In every trial, that's the way it is. I think the tape is critical for the prosecution's case. It really lays out the critical fact Dr. Conrad Murray administered the drugs. I mean, it certainly does that. There's no dispute now.
But he never denied that anyway.
Well, he certainly didn't deny it when he went in and spoke to the detectives.
Right.
I think he went in right away. He had a lawyer, of course, but he gave that statement. Nonetheless, it's certainly his demeanor, the way he describes the events, it certainly characterizes him to the jury as a caring person and in a good light. It certainly helps the defense in that way.
Was there anything about what he said, though, that sent off alarm bells?
Well, look, at any time a suspect goes in and gives a statement to the detectives.
Well, his attorneys were there.
But the attorneys don't know all the facts that we get later. And anytime you go in blind...
Well, neither did the police at that point.
Certainly. But anytime as representing somebody, you go in blind, he gives a statement, you're always subject to what may be uncovered later. The timeline, after that statement, the timeline became an issue.
Yeah.
Right. But now look, as the trial goes forward, I think for sure we're going to see Dr. Murray on the stand. That's my interpretation of what's happening.
Your colleagues agree.
Yeah, and I think he's going to have to take the stand and explain the problems in the timeline. We expect him to do it, certainly. But with that statement, I don't think it's going to hurt him to take the stand. He can agree with 90% of the statement, say there's some details that because of the excitement he was a little fuzzy on. Most people would be.
Right, but let me follow up on that, because it's not just a few minutes. He said that within a few minutes, he said he gave Michael the propofol at about 10:40, waited a few minutes, observed him, went to the bathroom for 2 minutes. So let's say we're at 10:50, even 11 o'clock. The call to Michael Amir that he talked about didn't happen until 12:13.
And the
you can't argue with that.
And remember the moment with Sade Anding, that was at 11:56. That
so
was
what
sort of
happened
the
in that
moment.
hour? That's
right. Well,
how would he explain that?
He's going to have to say that the time that
he was off.
He was off when it came to the date or time that he administered
The propofol.
That's the critical moment, because everything else after that you can explain. From the exciting moment that he finds Michael Jackson not breathing, everything else there becomes a blur. He's just doing what he needs to do.
And meantime, sorry to interject,
Sure.
but that would then go to what the defense said in their opening statement, which is they gave him the propofol, something happened, and within minutes he was dead.
Certainly, and that's what's going to happen. I don't think Conrad Murray was keeping notes at the precise time he administered the propofol.
Which is part of the problem.
Which is part of the problem, and it's problematic for the defense and for the prosecution.
But it sounds like, if you listen to the earlier parts of that he was fairly aware of the time. We got home at this certain time. I gave him 2 milligrams of the lorazepam at a certain time. It didn't work. That was 2 a.m. At 4 a.m. we did this. At 10 o'clock. So it sounded like he was aware of the time.
He's probably certainly aware of it to some extent, because as the evening goes in the early morning hours and Michael Jackson can't get to sleep, they're aware of the time to that extent. But I think realistically most people don't keep a minute-by-minute journal of these things, and certainly he wasn't at the time.
But if they put him on the stand, then he's subject to the prosecutors ripping him apart on that discrepancy.
One discrepancy,
Well,
that's going to be it. And beyond that, he's going to get to sit there and say, I've been honest. They were investigating me. I didn't hide. I came forward. I'm here in front of you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm here. I'm telling you the truth.
Right.
I've been honest from the get-go.
All right. Well, we're going to go on to what happened on Thursday. Day 8 of the trial, the defense was on the attack, at one point getting an investigator to admit she made mistakes.
Now, will that be important to the jury? We'll eventually find out. But the defense couldn't shake the fact that jurors heard testimony that, yes, there was propofol found in Michael Jackson's body.
Can we discuss what half-life is to the jury to educate them a little bit?
Back and forth.
And I'm very confused what you're even asking me now.
The prosecution's witness, a toxicologist.
We did not quantitate it.
And a stern defense attorney challenging his findings.
We didn't feel it was relevant.
It went on for hours like this, but the key testimony already in. The results of a test on a syringe from Michael Jackson's bedroom.
We detected propofol and lidocaine.
Propofol in Jackson's body, that's what jurors heard. They also heard results of fingerprint testing on 23 pieces of medical evidence, including a print found on a bottle of propofol.
This left index fingerprint was matched to defendant Conrad Murray. The syringe had one thumbprint. This thumbprint was matched to coroner investigator Alyssa Fleet.
This, of course, undercuts the defense theory that Jackson, quote, self-administered the fatal dose.
You chronicle the evidence.
Still, the defense did score some points going after another coroner investigator, Fleek, for 2 hours. She said she found this propofol bottle inside the IV bag, but only photographed it outside. And she admitted she left a thumbprint on a syringe, even though correct procedure is to wear gloves.
Ms. Fleek, would you agree with me that you made a substantial number of mistakes in your investigation of this case?
No.
And though this trial is, of course, about the tragic death of a genius and so much is at stake for the defendant, it does have its light moments, like this exchange between defense attorney J. Michael Flanagan and the coroner's man, toxicologist Dan Anderson, trying to answer a question.
I don't know. I mean, I like to agree with you, but I just don't know.
Okay.
That one.
I'd like for you to agree with me, too.
So continuing with Anthony Falangetti, defense attorney, what did you make of that, attacking the coroner's investigators and their techniques and exposing mistakes?
Well, we've watched the prosecution's case almost roll unabated up until this point. But see, this is the thing. This case is going to be about the experts, and now the defense is starting to go on the attack mode with the DA's experts. Even when it comes to the collection of evidence, and even when it comes to the toxicologist, this is going to be the focal point of the defense's case, to attack this cause of death.
They were wrong about what killed them.
Wrong about what killed them,
or
wrong about really that it was Conrad Murray's fault and his administering the drugs and how he did it.
Or specific to the syringe that had the coroner investigator's thumbprint or fingerprint on there. You know, they're going to say, well, how do we know for sure that there was no Michael Jackson fingerprint? Your thumbprint is on there. It might have blurred it.
Correct. And it just goes to the sloppiness of the investigation. And if the defense is going to claim that in some way Michael Jackson self-administered the drug, any sort of damage to the evidence like that or contamination goes directly to the defense's case.
Right, and we've been talking with the attorneys like yourself who are saying, pointing out or reminding us that if it's a circumstantial case and the evidence could be interpreted to guilt or innocence, then the judge is going to instruct them by law they have to vote for not guilty, right?
That's correct. The standard of law in California is on any circumstantial case, if there's two reasonable interpretations of the evidence and one of them favors not guilty, the jurors must accept that interpretation. That's the definition of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, or reasonable doubt in the opposite.
So, I find it hard to believe that that investigator took off the glove and handled material, evidence.
But you remember when they tried to rehabilitate her on redirect, they said, have you ever conducted a perfect investigation? She said no. So let's say she was there for at least 2 days that we know about. She handled dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence. If at one point she had a lapse and didn't have a glove on, does that mean you throw out everything that they did?
Well, it doesn't mean you throw out everything you did, but certainly if the investigation is problematic and if the prosecution's witnesses are making the mistakes, the prosecution still has to pay that cost. And to say, well, you've never been perfect isn't an excuse. The bottom line is, if there are deficiencies in the evidence and it's reasonable to doubt guilt,
there you go,
then you have to live with that doubt.
All right.
Was it possible for Michael Jackson to give himself a dose of propofol after the doctor left the room?
He could have reached over to the IV and either opened up the clamp or turned up the rate of infusion.
We talked to an anesthesiologist to find out how that could possibly have happened.